Gary, we've heard you talk a lot about car crashes. What's the difference between commercial truck cases and car crashes?
There's a big difference between commercial truck cases and car crash cases. When you deal with commercial trucks, you've got an entire body of law, rules and regulations. They're called the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Rules and Regulations. We'll just call them the rules here, but there's literally hundreds of these rules. The drivers of these big commercial trucks, these big rigs, have to comply with these rules and regulations, and the carriers, the companies, have to comply. And you have to understand, we're going to go over this because a lot of these trucking companies are under a lot of pressure to have their product delivered very quickly to market. And it can be different kinds of pressure, but that's what happens. And they want the drivers to get them to the market. They want the product loaded. They want it to the market and the product unloaded. Unfortunately, sometimes that makes either the company and or the driver cut a lot of corners. And when you cut corners on the federal rules and regs, you get into trouble. And we're going to talk about it today, but you can get into trouble from fatigue, overloads, cargo shifts, overturnings, brakes, maintenance, pre-inspection routines that are not followed properly. And there's a whole host of these regulations that are important to you to know for your safety and the safety of your family.
Gary, if one of my family members is involved in a collision with a commercial truck, is it important for me to obtain certain records immediately?
It really is, but one of the most important things you need to do right away in most car crashes is to seize the truck. You do it through a court order. You've got to get control of the truck. There's all kinds of information on the truck. There's ECMs, electronic control modules. There's black boxes. There's GPSs, global positioning systems. There's the logbooks, and sometimes there's two sets of logs, which we're going to talk about today. But you must get in touch with the evidence. You must get a hold of the evidence and keep it and have it tested. Sometimes you have to have it tested by engineers, by professionals, by human factors experts, and this is very important to do. Also, the logs are very important. You want to know if the truck driver had two sets of logs or three sets of logs. You want to know how they were fabricated, if they were fabricated. Many times they are changed, they are falsified, they are fraudulent, and you need to get in touch with the equipment. You need to get a hold of the equipment, get control of the equipment and the driver's logs.
And what about immediate testing on the driver of the commercial truck?
Right, usually under the federal motor rules that we're talking about, the company has to give a drug or alcohol test to the driver, and you want to get your hands on that. Sometimes they're not going to give you this right away. We have a letter that we call a protection letter or a spoliation letter. What does that mean? You give a letter to the carrier, this big trucking company, who, by the way, has a safety director, and you give a letter to them and you demand under the federal rules that they do not cause the evidence to be spoiled. They don't destroy the evidence. The evidence doesn't get lost. And we know sometimes, and many times they're going to do it anyway, but if you give them a letter under the federal motor rules, then you can protect your case and protect your rights later when you discover how bad the injuries are and what you need to do against the trucking company.
No, you said there's at least two sets of logs and that the commercial driver has to maintain or keep. Could you explain these logs?
Sure. I mean, every driver has to maintain logs, a set of logs under the federal motor rules. What they do a lot of times is they have two sets of logs. It's amazing when you see these drivers' logs that they go cross-country, but evidently they don't ever stop to eat because that's not in their logs, and evidently they never stop to go to the restroom or use the bathroom because that's not in their logs. That's the first sign that you can use to tell if these logs are being falsified or fraudulent. What difference does it make? Because it makes a big difference if the driver has driven over the number of allotted hours per day or per week under the federal motor rules. They become fatigued. They fall asleep. They pop pills. All of this is illegal. All of this leads to very disastrous consequences, very serious catastrophic injuries, and this is one way you fight back. This is one way you protect your rights and your remedies.
How do you go about proving that these logs are inaccurate?
Sometimes you can just take the driver through in his or her deposition and have them draw the log that you went from Chattanooga, Tennessee to Atlanta, Georgia, and you said you did it in so many hours or so many days. But if what your log says is true, you'd be stuck in Kentucky. You'd be stuck in a completely different location. That's why sometimes you want the GPS, the global positioning system, on the truck. You want the electronic control modules. You want their electronic data. And nowadays, many of these trucking companies at the home station, the home base, monitor their trucks by the global positioning system, and you can get a printout from them. Despite what the driver says, you can figure out where that truck was exactly and what it did.
Now, is it important to obtain documents from the carrier itself, such as the driver personnel file?
Sure. You've got to understand a couple of basic things. When you have a major collision involving a commercial truck, you must get the documents from the driver, and also you must get all the documents from the company. So, once again, you got to get the documents from the driver, which could be the same and could be different from the documents from the company. From the driver, what you want to get, we've covered the logbooks. You want to get their drug and alcohol testing. You want to get their meal receipts or gas receipts or restaurant receipts or hotel receipts. Sometimes they stay in motels overnight. It's hard for them to say they stayed in a motel 1,000 miles away and then drove 2,000 miles to get somewhere. It's hard for them to fabricate that. They want to make it up because they don't want to be fatigued. They don't want to be tired driving these big rigs, these 18-wheelers. They want to be in compliance with the federal rules, because if they're not, then you can use them to protect your rights when you're injured or there's a very serious catastrophic situation.
What are different documents I'd want to request or demand from the company, the carrier?